You're probably aware that, the United States military, the Army, and my examples that I'm going to be using, is having a hard time with recruitment, right? A hard time trying to get people to want to join, people to want to stay in the Army. I've got potentially 5 things that I can think of that, in my opinion, might help with the situation. So maybe compared to what you think maybe the Army could do, the military could do to improve these things, but these are my 5, and let's kind of talk about those. Of course, if this is the type of thing you're looking to learn about, you're looking to learn about the United States Army, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, click on that bell so you get alerts as soon as new videos go live, and become a part of that awesome notification platoon. But let's dive into the first of the 5 ways that I personally believe that maybe, just maybe, the Army could help out and get better retention numbers, as well as maybe even get more people interested in wanting to join. Probably a lot of these would be more focused to getting people to want to stay in the Army, maybe not quite as much as far as people wanting to join, possibly, but the first one is going to be improving the living conditions. Now, if you're a married soldier and you choose to live off post, well, then it's just based on whatever apartment, house, whatever it is you're renting or whatever it is your arrangement is. But when it comes to living on post, there is a little bit of, issues that probably people have heard about and maybe even seen. First off, on-post housing, right? You have married individuals that live in on-post housing if it's available and they choose to do so. And the housing really themselves, at least for a little bit higher ranking, is actually pretty nice. I mean, E1, E2, E3, maybe even, those ones do kind of suck and they're kind of like ghetto apartments sometimes in some locations anyways. But usually if you have like a larger family or you're like an E4, E5 or above, the housing is actually pretty nice. The problem really lies in like the Army taking care of that housing. So you might have pretty nice housing, but the Army's having problems like mold, bad water on base to where, on-post housing has to boil the water, all sorts of things like that. So really is where a lot of it kind of like falls apart, is the Army just not really taking good care of these on-post housing and maybe having shady contractors or something. Something in there is falling apart to where they're not doing a good job. So they need to fix that. They need to focus a little bit better attention on taking care of the on-post housing to make sure that it stays in a good standard. I mean, the Army usually has a pretty high standard as far as the way they expect you to conduct yourself, the way they expect you to have your living conditions, but yet in some cases it's not really followed through with their part in making sure that their end is at a high standard. So they need to get that under control. They need to get someone to fix the problems with the mold, with bad water, with whatever else that could be possibly bad with on-post housing. But it doesn't stop at on-post housing. Of course, you gotta mention the barracks. If you are a single soldier in the United States Army, you live in the barracks. And the barracks definitely have improved over the years. I mean, there was times where it was really rough. I mean, it was like a prison cell practically type of thing where, you're inside of a concrete room kind of a thing. If you want a little bit of privacy, you got to put up some bed sheets or something, and then you got to go down the hall to go use the bathroom and the showers. And they've definitely improved since those days. But there is still, I think, some things that need to be still worked in there. I mean, they're kind of going in the right direction, but they're still not quite there. I feel that the barracks in the Army need to be more like a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, because the way they currently are just still kind of feels like you have a lot of restrictions, which you do. It needs to be more of a setup to where you walk in and maybe have like a small little kitchen and a living room, not like some little common area where you have no room or anything like that, and then 2 separate rooms or 1 separate room or 1 open room where it's just kind of like a studio apartment. It needs to have like a nice living area. It needs to feel like an apartment. And then if it's like something like a 2-bedroom one, then maybe it's got 2 separate doors with separate keys. That way you have your own personal stuff in one room and your roommate has their personal stuff in the other room. And then you share like a living room kind of area where it's got maybe some Army issued couches and maybe even a TV to help boost morale. So you got at least the one there. And if you want another TV inside of your room, then that's on you. But have like an actual living room and make it feel like more like living in an apartment. They have definitely improved on some things when it comes to the barracks, like when it comes to like stoves. They now usually have, in the more modern, newer barracks, they have stoves. I've even seen some that have ovens. It used to be at one point in time where, and even still in some units, that you couldn't have like hot plates. So everything you had to cook inside your room had to be cooked inside of a microwave. My problem, like I lived in the days of living in the barracks where we couldn't have the hot plates, we didn't have stoves, we didn't have ovens or anything. So I had to cook everything that I was gonna make in a microwave. And that kind of led to me not really learning how to cook for myself until my late 20s. So the Army kind of needs to stop babying the soldiers that live in the barracks. I understand that there is kind of, to a certain extent, it necessary for some people, but in the end, they're adults. And if they can't act properly and act as adults, then there needs to be consequences. And you need to stop kind of holding their hand and trying to treat them like children, which kind of leads into the second one. So the Army kind of needs to stop babying the soldiers that live in the barracks. I understand that there is kind of, to a certain extent, it necessary for some people, but in the end, they're adults. And if they can't act properly and act as adults, then there needs to be consequences. And you need to stop kind of holding their hand and trying to treat them like children, which kind of leads into the second one. I know that one was kind of maybe a little bit lengthy, but leading to the second one is stop treating soldiers like they're children. They're adults, they're 18 and older, right? Some of them are in their 20s, some of them 30s, whatever the case is. And mainly like with living in the barracks, starting off with this kind of topic, because there is a lot of restrictions in the barracks that kind of makes you feel like a child. Things like you can't have visitors past a certain time. Things like these room inspections that have to be done. Things like you can't do this, you can't do that in the barracks. There still has to be some kind of structure, otherwise the barracks are gonna fall apart. They're gonna turn ghetto as hell type of thing. You probably need to keep firearms still out of the barracks, probably still need to keep pets out of the barracks. So even though those ones do still feel like being treated like a child, those ones probably are still necessary, otherwise the barracks are gonna just become the ghetto, and we probably don't want that. Probably even some units probably already have it being like the ghetto, but other certain things you can probably relax a little bit on. Maybe you do an occasional health and welfare type of thing, but for the most part, no room inspections. You know, if the soldiers live in horrible, someone's complaining about it, then take some kind of action. If you do a health and welfare because, you know, something's going on where you think soldiers are using drugs in the barracks, do a health and welfare inspection, look for that kind of stuff. But otherwise, let the soldier live. Visitors, you know, the tricky thing is yeah, you don't probably want soldiers going and like having their girlfriend move in with them in the barracks, but at the same time, you should allow them to maybe have overnight visitors. But maybe there would need to be some kind of like way to kind of modify it to where you could have visitors, but still ensuring that nobody's like having like a boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, start living with them in the barracks. And there are probably some other things you probably lighten up on in the barracks, but mainly, you know, just lighten up to where soldiers don't feel like they're children living in the barracks. But even going beyond that, I mean, there's other things even outside of the barracks that the Army needs to stop kind of like treating these soldiers like they're idiots, like they're children, whatever. One of those is like the mileage pass thing, right? You usually have like a 350 miles or 250 miles, whatever the command has for that local area, where you can't go outside that mileage radius. And if you do want to go outside that mileage radius, you have to get permission to do so. Now, there is still readiness that's probably involved with that, right? You probably don't want to go free range with this and let everybody just do whatever they want to do. And then let's say stuff hits the fan and, you know, we really need to deploy and everybody's like hundreds and thousands of miles away or whatever, away from the base, and it's going to take forever to get everybody back to, you know, take action kind of a thing. But maybe still like a sort of a pass kind of a thing, but it's not really like a approved or denied based on the soldier. It's more of a, hey, a certain percentage of you, if you want to take off, I don't care where you're going, you can go do so, but the other percentage is not allowed to do that. So maybe there is still kind of like a submission process type of thing to say, hey, I want to travel outside of the mileage radius, but they're not really asking where you're going to go, what your plan is. Leave that on the soldier, right? If they're horrible at planning stuff, consequences, right? The person gets in trouble, you know, that way they learn from their mistakes or whatever, or they learn to plan better. But nonetheless, maybe staying out of their business and being like, what are you planning on doing? Where are you gonna go? What are you gonna do if you can't make it back? How are you gonna get back on time? Leave that on them, and if they fail to get back on time, then that's on them. But so maybe it's a thing like, hey, I want to go outside the 250 mile radius, and then a certain percentage of those soldiers in that unit gets approved to do so, the first come, first serve. The rest maybe get denied if they were trying to do so because you still got to maintain maybe a certain percentage in case something does hit the fan, I guess. But there's probably other examples of ways that the Army really kind of treats soldiers like they're children and really kind of babies them and kind of holds their hand and puts these restrictions to maybe, you know, help the soldier out. POV inspections, all sorts of stuff, you know, they kind of do. But in the end, to the soldier, it feels like you're treating them like a child. And in the end, they end up wanting to get out of the Army because they're tired of being treated that way. And maybe with good intentions, the Army's doing it. And for some soldiers, they need that. But maybe if soldiers need that, they shouldn't be soldiers. But nonetheless, for a lot of soldiers, it feels like they're being treated like children. And they want to get out of the Army because they're tired of being treated that way. The third one may be controversial to some of you. Some of you will totally agree with me, but I feel beards should be allowed in the United States Army. And beards is just really the main point. There's probably other things outside of beards, but it's along the same lines, right? is that there are certain things that are maybe more old school Army type of thing, and it kind of goes back to that last thing of soldiers being treated like children, and they want to get out because they want that freedom. They don't want to be treated like that, like they're feeling like they're being treated like children, and not allowing them to have some facial hair sometimes, feels like that a little bit. I know there's some of you that are like, well, it's done for a reason, it's because of the NBC thing. Easy solution, right? If you're going to the field, you're deploying, that kind of a thing, you have to shave. If we're in garrison, you're not deploying, you're not in the field type of thing, then there's some kind of standard as far as what you can grow. Maybe it's the limit of what you can grow with a shaving profile. Maybe it's something like what I've got here. Maybe there is some kind of policy in there. If you got some kind of crazy patchy beard, then that's not gonna work type of thing. You're gonna have to shave until you can actually grow a real beard or something. But nonetheless, I think that it would boost morale of soldiers. And again, kind of go back to that last one of making them actually feel like they have some responsibility and they're treated like adults. I'm not saying let soldiers grow some crazy, super long ZZ Top beard that looks like they're hillbillies type of thing, or they're, something out of, what's that show with the duck hunter guys or whatever? Can't think of it. You can probably comment down below if you really want. But, have something kind of, it still looks, I guess, somewhat professional, somewhat maintained type of thing. Like I said, maybe stick to like what the standards are for when you have a shaving profile. Maybe that's the standard and anybody's allowed to do that type of thing, unless maybe there's some kind of religious exemption where you do need to have your beard longer than that or something. But nonetheless, let them have that and then go to the field, go to deployment, shave it off. And there's other things kind of along those lines, but kind of relaxing on some of those things, not to the extent of, just letting soldiers do whatever they want and looking unprofessional type of thing, but certain things don't really matter that much. You easily can look professional and have a nice, short, trimmed beard. There's other things you can probably do and still look professional, but having some kind of other kind of leniencies with the men. We did a lot of kind of flexing on like female soldiers, allowing them to have this and that and ponytails and all that stuff like that, and the men definitely felt left out on that. So there definitely needs to be some kind of policies to kind of adjust for men to kind of maybe get something kind of the same kind of like relaxation that the female soldiers ended up getting, was it last year, year before that, with all of the changes in the Army standards for like hair and nails and everything. Relax on some of the stuff for guys that can still present a professional appearance and everything like that, and let them have that motivation and that little bit of encouragement to feel like that they can, be more of an individual and not all look the same. Probably be good for security too, because a lot of times you're out in the local public in an area near a base, you can always tell who the soldiers are, at least the men anyways, because they're clean shaved, short haircuts and everything like that, and you can tell that's a soldier right there. Where if maybe there was a little bit more variety in their appearance, it would be harder for them to be identified as a soldier, specifically for like, targeting purposes for like, terrorists or other kind of organizations that want to target soldiers specifically. The fourth one is that the Army needs to improve on kind of how soldiers are treated. I mean, you see a lot of stuff in the news, how soldiers are being mistreated. Maybe it's, rape, maybe it's other kind of abuse of some sort, and the Army doesn't seem like they're doing anything about it in at least the cases you hear about. I mean, I'm sure that there are cases out there where the Army is doing something about it. They're cracking down on these individuals, and these individuals are getting punished for doing such things to other soldiers. But then the ones that make the news are the ones where the soldiers are getting mistreated and the Army is not doing anything about it. Because that's what you're gonna hear about. You're gonna hear about those situations. You're not gonna hear about the ones where so-and-so complained about, being mistreated and it was handled and their leadership got in trouble for it. You're not gonna probably hear about that very often. You're gonna hear about a soldier was mistreated and the leadership didn't do anything about it, because that's gonna make waves. That's gonna, cause some problems, and people are gonna hear about that, and then it creates that negative image because they see that, hey, soldiers are getting treated like crap and nobody's doing anything about it. So nonetheless, the Army probably needs to do something about that. Maybe it's something where it's like a neutral party. Maybe it's like a GS civilian. So it's a government civilian that soldiers go to when they have, a situation where they're being mistreated. Maybe it's like a rape kind of situation or some other kind of abuse of some sort. And they go to a civilian organization that's maybe like a veteran individuals that maybe have some kind of like, law school type of thing, or worked in JAG previously, something along the lines that knows how to handle these situations and is qualified. And it's not a military individual that soldiers sometimes feel like might be corrupt, possibly. Because sometimes that's the problem, right? Is that soldiers don't want to go and report these things because they have to go to report it to another soldier, and they feel like it's just corrupt, and they feel like it's not going to get anything done. It's going to get swept under the rug. Where maybe if it was a civilian organization that's made up of veterans, kind of like, I don't know, some kind of, policy where you have to have a background of being a veteran and having maybe, JAG experience or some kind of, experience that's qualifying for this type of thing, then those are the individuals that you would go to And so it doesn't maybe feel like that maybe it's gonna get swept under the rug because they're not somebody that has some kind of ties to the leadership. Nonetheless, right, it's a problem. Even one incident is a problem. And that's still a big thing of why people don't want to join, right? People hear about these situations of things that are going down at Fort Hood, things that are going on in other places or whatever, and they're like, man, I don't want that to happen to me, right? So it's an issue, and Army needs to find a better way to probably take care of that. Now, I got one more, which would be the fifth one, but of course, if you have other ways that you think that maybe the Army could probably improve on morale to get people to stay in, to get outsiders to want to join, I want to hear about that down in the comment section down below. These are just my opinions. I'd like to hear your opinions because some of my opinions might suck and some of your opinions might be even better than the ones I got. But I'd love to hear about them either way, whether they're great opinions, bad opinions. I mean, I don't know if I want to hear about bad opinions on purpose, but nonetheless, I would like to hear your opinions. Comment down below. But let's get into the fifth one though. Fifth one is, I think there needs to be some kind of better accountability for toxic leadership. That's a problem with a lot of units where soldiers might get stationed at a place that's awesome. Maybe they get stationed at a place that's horrible. And the reason why it's horrible is because of the leadership, or they get stationed somewhere that's awesome and it becomes horrible because of the leadership. There needs to be almost some kind of like evaluation type of thing where maybe, you know, I mean, they kind of have like the sensing sessions, they call it, where, you know, you talk to somebody and they want to know, you know, how's your leadership and how's everything. But sometimes that stuff doesn't go anywhere. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But there needs to probably be a better system, some kind of better system where, you know, if let's say you have a platoon sergeant, toxic as hell, right? Doing horrible things. Well, then if it's kind of like a consensus or a common theme with the whole platoon where all the soldiers feel that this platoon sergeant is doing a horrible job and is toxic, then it's going to reflect in some kind of evaluation almost in a way, because maybe someone else is going to evaluate from the soldier's perspective as far as how well is the leadership taking care of you. And if there's a couple, you know, soldiers here and there, they're like, oh, I hate the leadership, it's horrible, but the majority of the soldiers say, no, it's good, they take care of me, then it's probably just some kind of disgruntled soldier, some soldier that maybe, you know, has some kind of, you know, chip on their shoulder or whatever the case is. But if it's something where a large percentage of this platoon is saying that the leadership is bad, then maybe the Army needs to do something about it, and maybe there's some kind of process to do that. Because right now, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do. You have a leadership, you have a platoon leader, a platoon sergeant, first sergeant, commander, whatever, that's toxic, that is mistreating soldiers, not, you know, leading by example, doing whatever it is, making their life miserable. There's nothing that can be really done about it. You have to usually suck it up, drive on, hopefully eventually they leave, you leave, something, and something will improve. But maybe having something like that where there is like a neutral party that annually, half a year, every year, whatever, I don't know, some kind of, you know, time frame, comes in, sits down with that platoon without any of the NCOs and talks to those soldiers and be like, hey, how is your leadership? Is your leadership treating you well? Are they treating you bad? And then kind of going from there and seeing like, hey, is it the mass majority of the platoon, or is it just a few individuals here and there that are saying that's bad leadership? And then if it is the majority of the platoon, then something needs to be done about these individuals to get rid of this toxic leadership. So these are just my opinions. Some of them may be great, some of them may suck, and some of them may not change anything if the Army even was listening to me in the first place. But nonetheless, those are my opinions as far as things that I think might help improve mainly soldiers to stay in the Army, but could also help with getting people to want to become soldiers and join the Army in the first place. So if you have some things you can think of, comment down below. But if you want to learn about the worst platoon sergeant I ever had, check this video out right here. Check out my links down in the description box down below. Follow me on social media. Check out my affiliate links. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya.